Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Talia Inlander, and I'm the Deputy Director at the Center for Immigration Law and Policy at the UCLA School of Law. Before we begin, I want to start by acknowledging our presence here at UCLA on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our program today, Lessons in Resistance, Learning from the Response to the LA Raids. I want to thank our incredible team who made this event possible, in particular Chloe Lynn, Cora Cervantes, and Sandra Hernandez. Los Angeles has been ground zero for the federal government's so-called mass deportation agenda. Today's interdisciplinary panel will explore how Angelenos have fought back through litigation, organizing, and storytelling. I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists. Mayra Joachín is the Immigrants' Rights Project Deputy Director and a Senior Staff Attorney at the ACLU of Southern California, where she uses advocacy and litigation strategies to challenge immigration detention and combat racially discriminatory policing. Mayra is counsel on Vázquez Perdomo v. Nom, a lawsuit filed in July of this year that seeks to end unlawful immigration stops and arrests in Los Angeles and surrounding counties, and to protect the due process rights of people who are detained. Carlos Amador is the Economic Justice Manager at CLEAN Carwash Worker Center. Carlos is a strategist and organizer who has played key roles in successful local, state, and national immigrant justice campaigns, including the passage of the LA Sanctuary Ordinance, the state sanctuary law known as the California Values Act, and the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. In his current role, Carlos works with Carwasheros, a group that has been heavily targeted in LA's ICE raids. Jacob Soboroff is the Senior Political and National Correspondent at MSNBC. He's an award-winning journalist and author of the New York Times bestseller, Separated: Inside an American Tragedy, which tells the story behind America's systematic separation of families at the US-Mexico border during the first Trump administration. He's also executive producer of Separated, a film based on the book. Jacob has been on the front lines of reporting on immigration enforcement and its human impacts in Los Angeles, Chicago, and beyond. Today's conversation will be moderated by my colleague and friend, Hiroshi Motomura, faculty co-director of the Center for Immigration Law and Policy, and Susan Westerberg Prager, distinguished professor of law. His new book, Borders and Belonging: Toward a Fair Immigration Policy, offers a blueprint for building a more just immigration system, very different than the one we'll be discussing today. Thank you all for joining us. Before I turn over the floor, we have a compilation of short videos drawing from our panelists' work to provide context for the conversation that will follow.
Surveillance footage. Two white vehicles pull into an LA parking lot. This is President Trump's immigration policy in action. As the US Border Patrol agents approach, the workers washing cars down tools and flee. 6 of them are detained.
9-year-old business owner says he was body slammed and pinned to the ground by federal agents during an immigration raid despite being a U.S. citizen.
That he says made him really understand what it meant. Agents were conducting an operation outside his shop on June 12th.
I just went to go look. Honestly, they don't know it was a crime to go look.
The video shows one agent pushing Brian up against the wall and demanding he prove his citizenship.
I truly believe I was a target because of my race. I believe I was racially profiled. Where's the freedom? Where's the justice? We live in America. We should be free. We should have justice. This is why I'm fighting today. This is why I'm protecting the Constitution.
He now carries a mini Constitution in his pocket and is one of 7 plaintiffs in the ACLU lawsuit that resulted in a district court's order preventing federal agents from conducting sweeps based on race, accents, or where someone works in 7 Southern California counties.
People are out here with their signs. Here, may I show your sign, ma'am? Can I? Your sign says...
We are not criminals.
Whoa, 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 let's go.
Peaceful protest. We're not doing nothing wrong.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
We have the freedom of speech.
Go, 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 go. You have to be careful, okay? You take care of yourself. Is that these are the scenes that are playing out every single day here in Chicago. And when I say the scenes, I mean against sort of the narrative that this administration has had about these being the worst of the worst. come with me, I want to show you something. This is the bakery itself, and this is where it all played out. These agents evidently rolled up on this bakery. These 2 coffee cups that are right here on the street right now are the 2 men's coffee cups. Connor, dip the camera down a little bit more so we can see them. That were left here on the side of the road after they were snatched by these immigration agents.
Well, thank you all for being here, and we really appreciate it. This is just an important conversation to have. I also want to acknowledge all the folks online. I know in Los Angeles, when it rains, people feel they can't go outside. But we have quite a few people virtually, and so I appreciate you making the effort to come on out. This is going to be a conversation. This is not sort of 3 or 4 10-minute presentations. I'm not actually sure what's going to happen, but I'm looking forward to it. Don't worry, I've got more questions. You're not going to run out of time. We've got a lot of questions. But I really wanted to appreciate the fact that we have 3 panelists who have really unique but very informed and expertise and experience-driven perspectives on the situation. And I think that together we can have a conversation to kind of sort this out and really go to this title, like learning from the response to the LA raids, and that's the spirit in which we're going to have this conversation. So I don't know what's going to do. This is not pre-recorded and lip-synced or anything like that. We're actually going to do this. Okay. So I'm going to start, Carlos, with you, which is that we saw the videos, just a very thin, very cursory. Inevitably, it's better than. The picture is worth 1,000 words, but there's a lot that it doesn't capture, and I know we're going to be talking about this the whole time, but I want to get some sense of you of what's not there. What are 1 or 2 things that happened that you've experienced in your circle of, both work and personally? What's not there?
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here in the space. So great to see some familiar faces, and hello to everyone who's joining us online. I think just watching these videos, and there's so many others, right? And some of the things that I think I reflect on in regards to that is not seen in the video is the fact that, for instance, with car wash sites, many of the car wash sites have, signs that show protection for workers, right? That like call out and say, this is like a private property, it's for customers and workers only, and still those spaces are being trespassed by masked ICE agents, right? The fact that many of the workers know their rights, right? Like our organization has led many Know Your Rights trainings. Many other organizations across Southern California have led Know Your Rights training, and still their rights are being violated, obviously. The fact that anecdotally, some of the business owners, some of the people that have been targeted have a range of political affiliations, and that this administration is, being indiscriminate in regards to how they're attacking our communities here in Southern California. And I think one big thing to highlight here, or I think two things to highlight as well, is the fact that there's like a growing, strong, infrastructure of volunteer-led rapid response networks and rapid response groups that are alerting oftentimes ahead of time, trying to alert ahead of time, or responding after the raid to get information to try to locate the workers, whether they're day laborers, street vendors, car wash workers, or others, to try to connect with their families and support the workers that have been detained, as well as the just a growing sense of like urgency that has been happening with the collaboration with legal advocates and legal experts, as well as the legal service organizations. So that is some of the things that are not seen in the videos, but the organizations that have been mobilizing since the election, really, but especially since June 6th, when the first raid hit in LA.
Well, I mean, you raised at least three themes that I think we're going to follow up. I just want to flag them for now. I mean, one of it is the sort of ICE doing this in ways that, violate a lot of legal constraints on the ability to do this. So that's one. Another is what you mentioned about community organizing and rapid response networks. And the third, is really pushing back in court as well. But I just want to mention that. But Jacob, let me go to you and ask a different question. I mean, you are in one of these videos, and so you've been in the front line in a different sense. And I guess what I want to ask you is, what's the journalist's role in this moment? And I'm also struck that raids like this have gotten a fair amount of coverage, but not as much as they could have, right? And so I'm curious about how you see yourself. What goes into that video where you were? Just tell us about that.
I think, and let me also echo Carlos and say thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys for being here, and thanks to everybody who's watching online as well. For me, this is a story that I've been telling as long as I've been working at MSNBC, MS now, as of tomorrow, guys.
Okay.
Say your,
I don't know what you said, but I got to keep up with that.
The channel's not going to change, just the name.
Okay.
What is our slogan? New mission, same name.
Okay.
But as long as I've been at MSNBC, and that's 11 years. From the moment I started, I wanted to tell this story because it's a story about people, not necessarily about politics. Mm-hmm. And over my time there, I've worked as the United States has had Democratic and Republican presidents that have had deterrence-based, punitive-based immigration policies that criminalize people that are just looking for a better life. Starting with Barack Obama when I came, and I did stories about how he was deporting more people than anyone else in the history of the country, and why it was so easy for Donald Trump to institute the family separation policy that I reported on so extensively in 2018. And Joe Biden, I went to Haiti and I watched Joe Biden expel a record number of Haitians to Haiti and to certain danger, if not death. I watched him let in Ukrainians after coming back from Ukraine, while people who didn't look like the Ukrainians sat on the other side of the border and waited. And then I reported from the floor of the Republican convention when thousands, tens of thousands of people held up those signs that said mass deportation now. And I knew at the time, what is mass deportation? It's family separation by another name. It's not family separation at the border, but it's certainly family separation in the interior. And so what's playing out on the streets and what I'm seeing and what is the role of a journalist? It is, I'm going to paraphrase Walter Cronkite, I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but something to the effect of to hold a mirror up to society to reflect back what's happening in our own communities. And that's exactly why I've always wanted to do this. I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles. The people whose stories I'm telling are neighbors and colleagues and friends, and I'm doing it together with many, many people, and particularly in this moment, I don't know if you call them citizen journalists or anyone with a phone, but I'll just use my first answer to your question to say, LA Taco, for instance, I think deserves a Pulitzer Prize for the work that they've done. I love those guys during all of these raids, and it's not something that legacy mainstream media can cover on its own or is equipped to cover better than anybody else. I think that the work they're doing is phenomenal. And so what's the role of the journalist? To like they say in the military and in diplomacy, figure out what the facts on the ground are, turn around and tell our audience in this case what they are, and let them make up their own mind about what we're seeing playing out on the streets of Los Angeles and Chicago and Portland and Memphis and Nashville and now Charlotte maybe next week, and on and on and on.
Yeah, no, I mean, as with Carlos's answer, I mean, there's a lot of layers to what you're raising. I mean, the regional and mainstream media and who's actually telling the stories. But Mayra, let me bring you into something that Carlos raised, which is basically ICE doing things that are illegal. And you've been at the front line of that. I mean, in the case, the Vasquez-Perdomo case versus Nome. And I just wanted to get your sense of, what the role of lawsuits and courts are in this thing. Is it about know your rights? Is it about pushing back in court? It's an important case. I mean, I'm working on a revision of our casebook, and I said, if there's one case that you can use to teach so much in the field, it's this one. So tell us about that, but also really about the role that you think courts can play now.
Thank you, Hiroshi.
Or lawyers, right?
and thank you also for having me, and to everyone who's joining today. So there's several components to that litigation that I think are important to unpack and understand in terms of how we fight back and ensure that there's no more lawlessness against our communities. And so the litigation, while it is grounded on the claims and the laws that basically limit how immigration enforcement can operate, there is, of course, permissible immigration enforcement. However, there's many limitations to the way in which that enforcement can occur. And what we have seen through these videos, through the raids, through just the sheer force of excessive force, cruelty, and violence that are happening throughout these raids is that immigration agents are simply ignoring Fourth Amendment principles and statutes and regulations that indicate how and when they can stop someone. What they have been doing has, as you've seen from the videos, is they've been stopping individuals simply because of their apparent race, apparent occupation, because of the clothes that they're wearing, the locations where they're at. All of a sudden, they're criminalizing being brown, being at a public space, taking a bus, going to get your car washed, working at a car wash. And so none of that is permissible under the Fourth Amendment or what the Constitution says for how immigration enforcement can occur. And so at a basic line, the lawsuits have been filed to enforce what is available, the protections that are available to everyone, regardless of status, regardless of what country they're born in, and ensure that immigration agents are actually complying with the requirements under these various laws. However, there are a couple of other components to the litigation that I think are all necessary to ensure that the case itself and the way that these stories are presented is accurate. One, there is and Carlos and Jacob have both mentioned this earlier, but there is also a community and advocacy component, because these stories and these cases can only be successful if we are accurately depicting what is happening on the ground. And for us to do so, we need to be able to connect with individuals, families, everyone who's being impacted, who can tell us the various ways in which their rights were violated and the immigration agents abused them through these enforcement operations. So there is a separate narrative storytelling component that's at the heart of these cases, and that's the only way that we can go to the court, tell a judge, this is how different this kind of immigration enforcement is from what is legal and from how they could be conducting these operations. And then the third part I will say is that the other role that these lawsuits play is in ideally helping to create some affirmative framework in which we can ensure that going forward, our community's rights are not violated. The role that the courts have been playing through Vasquez Perdomo and some of the other rates cases and cases across the country is that they are essentially serving as the safeguard for non-citizens, for anyone who's here either lacking status or even U.S. citizens, and reminding them that their rights matter and that their rights are going to be protected. Today, there was an order issued elsewhere in the country that is now going to be releasing individuals because they were subjected to these unlawful arrests. And so through these cases, we are seeing courts respond to this unlawfulness and ensuring that people's rights are not continuing to be violated.
Yeah, so let me shift or maybe expand the topic, because all three of you talked about what the past and the present, right? And so I mean, I could call on one of you, but I think it's something that we can all build on what you said earlier, is that there's this sense that, how do you compare Obama being called the deporter in chief, right? How to know your rights and how to raids, are they different? How are lawsuits different? How are courts acting differently? So let me just toss this out. How are lawsuits different? How is the current fight compared to the politics of before? How is covering these raids different from covering them, not that long ago? I mean, I just want to, talk amongst yourselves here.
During family separation, I think obviously the world's attention was captured by what the first Trump administration was doing. And I think it was sort of a no-brainer for people to intellectualize. Family separation, in my opinion, gave people X-ray vision into seeing what the U.S. immigration system has always been, at least in my
Actually been doing.
in my lifetime. Yeah, punitive-based, deterrence-based, criminalization of people coming here, and Donald Trump became a very easy target because it was so obviously cruel and deliberately cruel. And don't take it from me, take it from Dana Sabra, the judge who stopped the policy, who said it's one of the most shameful chapters in the history of our country. Physicians for Human Rights said it was torture, according to the UN definition. American Academy of Pediatrics called the policy government-sanctioned child abuse. It wasn't bipartisan outrage, it was a universal outrage at the time. There were hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people in the street. The Pope spoke out about it. And it was the one significant, major, massive policy reversal, I think, of the first Trump administration. But what he said was not, I'm morally opposed to, oh my God, all you guys are right, I'm not morally opposed. He said, I didn't like the sight and the feeling of the families being separated. And that came in the wake of Ginger Thompson publishing that audio, the ProPublica audio, from inside the Border Patrol station in the Rio Grande Valley of the Border Patrol agents saying, oh, we have an orchestra here, as the children were all crying. I say in the film that Errol Morris made based on my book that I was worried. That movie came out before we knew who was going to be the next president. And what I say in the movie was I was fearful, and Jonathan White, we can get into all this, the career civil servant who was within HHS who tried to stop the policy, that Congress hadn't done anything in the wake of the policy to prevent it. And now, as we went into the election, as Biden's facing off against Trump, I say in the film, I think people want to know less. I think people...
That's different.
I think people want to know less. And while that may have been true maybe during the 2024 election and as the sort of the clock turned into this new administration, I am starting to feel different vibes on the street. Right. That people are starting to pay attention again, that people are seeing what's happening in everybody's communities, that people are feeling what any of us feel, that I feel. The Cypress Park Home Depot around the corner from my house, you've got dudes kitted out in tactical gear with long rifles running through a Home Depot parking lot and locking up a father with a 1-year-old in the back of the car. The more the stories come out, the more I think it starts to feel similar to family separation, but it wasn't a situation, or it hasn't been one, where everybody all at the same time said, like in the summer of 2018, oh, hey, wait a minute. This is not okay, and we're all experiencing this in unison.
Yeah, Carlos, I mean, what's your sense of comparing this? You've been active in immigrant rights movement for several phases of the movement, and what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it's very, very different, right? I think about back in 2009, 2010, when we were organizing for the Federal Dream Act, and in 2010, one of the big actions that we did across the country was the Coming Out of the Shadows actions, right? Which was an action that was coined or came out of the organizing in Chicago by undocumented youth, right? And so we were coming out, sharing our stories as undocumented students, as undocumented youth, taking that courageous stand, but also knowing that the more we spoke out, we were able to create some type of immunity amongst us in the movement, right? And I think comparing it to where we're at now, right? Like there is definitely a sense of fear of speaking out or sharing your story, not only from workers or non-organizers, but even organizers themselves, right? And so organizers are undocumented. Organizers are much more cautious about like being out, in the patrolling or the monitoring of different sites, right? And so I think that is one of the big difference. We see also the other side of it is, we called Obama the deporting chief, and one of the things that Obama had in his toolbox was the collaboration and entanglement with local law enforcement, right? And so I think what we have been able to do between 2011, when the first Trust Act bill was introduced in California, the first ever anti-detainer policy was introduced, and till now, right, we have been able to, at least in California and in other states, disentangle some of this police-sized collaboration. Obviously here locally in LA City and some LA County as well, ending all detainers and putting sanctuary ordinance in place. So I think that has been obviously a big help, and not having this pipeline of folks going from policing to the deportation machine. So there's a lot that has changed on that regard. I think we obviously a lot of the folks that were organizing during the Dream Act years, right, like are myself, older, right, like we're not dreamers anymore, right, and so I think we're in a different place in the movement as well, and thinking about the new, younger organizers who are post-DACA, right, like who don't qualify for DACA anymore, and what does it mean to organize as purely undocumented immigrants as well. I think that's the other layer that is very different. And I think ultimately, when we were pushing, I think oftentimes this is one of the narratives or the arguments that comes out of, during the election cycles, right? Like we're not voting for our, champion, we're voting for our, opponent, right? Like we're voting who we're going to be battling against, right? And so when we had Obama, there was leverage points that we were able to push on, right? Like there was prosecutorial discretion policies that were in place that we were able to push for individual, anti-deportation campaigns, and that's not existent anymore, right? And so I think those individualized public anti-deportation campaigns are not possible at this time. Obviously, there's the legal avenues that are being pushed, right? But like this political pressure to try to stop the deportation of individuals it's non-existent at this time. So I think very much relying on the mutual support, the mutual aid work, the grassroots, looking out for each other's back, where we're able to push at the local level.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many strands in what you said. I mean, I want to get back to the state and local in a few minutes, but I recall during that period, I mean, we had the prosecutorial discretion guidelines, or at least trying to work in that framework. And people, and I think ultimately the Coming Out of the Shadows campaign became very successful in the sense of DACA being one of the things that emerged from it. So there's a lot to unpack there. But Mayra, how are lawsuits different compared to earlier times? We have a different court. We have different administration attitude. To the extent, I mean, you already addressed this from the perspective, it's not just winning the lawsuit. It's really part of the lawsuit's place in larger communication strategy and narrative. But how is this different? Trying to situate this historically.
Sure. And I think there's a few different components to how both the lawsuits and what's happening are different from how enforcement operations have happened in the past. I do want to pick up quickly on Carlos's point regarding retaliation, because these lawsuits operate and can be successful when we have individuals who are coming forward, right, and sharing their stories. And because of the increased retaliation against anyone, simply by being present, by documenting, we've seen ICE officers drag individuals. We've seen them use weapons against them simply because they're capturing what's happening or telling them to stop. All of a sudden, even though First Amendment has traditionally been respected in this country, they are not doing so. It's they're criminalizing any attempts to protest against those activities. And in that context, it's become increasingly difficult to find individuals who feel comfortable and safe, understandably, to come forward, not just people without status, but also people with status who may have family members in vulnerable conditions, or who themselves are afraid. And so there's been an increasing need for ensuring protections within these cases, ensuring that there's protection for anyone who's coming forward to share their stories so that they can have their identity and others' personal information remain confidential, so that there is a lower risk against them. But on the other side, the government is also seeking confidentiality, stating that they need to be masked because that will help keep protections for their officers, attempting to avoid disclosing the names of their officers.
And even the agency they're a part of, right?
Exactly. And so it's been creating more difficulties within the cases for what kind of information can be made available to the public, and what information is actually disclosed for how we can push back against them. The other areas in which this has also been different is just the over-militarization that has happened on the ground, and their attempts the government's attempts to ignore orders that are in place. There were news reports earlier this year that in response to a preliminary injunction that was issued in Kern County, there were agents from the government that were fired because they were attempting to have the local immigration officers follow and comply with the injunction. And so that is also different, that we now are facing agencies that are actively trying to ignore the orders that are coming down from the court. And we also are dealing with a Supreme Court that has started tolerating and granting the government's request without providing any reasoned explanations for why they're granting so, allowing them to continue with these enforcement operations in a way that are both dangerous because of the devastating impact that they're having on the community and also because of the dangerous implications for what it can mean for our Fourth Amendment law. And the last thing I'll say is that the way in which this is also differing from past actions is through the agency's attempt to push forward with a white supremacy agenda, essentially, where anyone who is a person of color can be subjected to these enforcement operations.
Yeah, I mean, some of what, I think this is part of what you're saying, but just to make it clear that this is not just in the area of raids, this is not just in the area of local enforcement, it's really the Alien Enemies Act and a lot of other situations where the Supreme Court is basically not letting court orders go into effect through what often people call the shadow docket of a decision. And sometimes there's a decision or by one justice or maybe several, but it's not really the opinion of the court. It's just the judge opining on the fact that we're not going to let the district court stop this type of profiling. Yeah.
Yes, and so in Vasquez-Perdomo, what we saw through the shadow docket was the court grant the government's request to stay the temporary restraining order that was in effect in Southern California, and the order was only a one paragraph, did not provide any basis for why they had decided to stay or put the temporary restraining order on pause. But yet there were opinions by other justices, including an opinion by Justice Kavanaugh that seemed to suggest that he would interpret the current principles very differently.
I just want to add that what's striking to me about that Kavanaugh concurrence is that to rely on allowing racial profiling in downtown Los Angeles, he cites a decision of the Supreme Court involving what the U.S. government can do at the border. I mean, that's so now we're at the border. I mean, the border is everywhere that you have an ICE agent. It's not this idea that it's but we can talk, more about that.
Can I just say about that? Add that. When I was in Chicago, J.B. Pritzker said to me, I was asking him, these are just Border Patrol agents that are here. These are not ERO, these are not ICE agents that are running around in the streets of Chicago. I said, what do you make of that? And he said, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but something to the effect of, well, they told me that because Lake Michigan is here, the 100-mile rule allowing Border Patrol agents...
It's a navigable waterway, huh?
By the way, Lake Michigan doesn't touch Canada. He said, this is a border with Canada. That's what they told him. And then he goes, no, but, or I guess somebody online messaged me, and Lake Michigan is the only Great Lake that has no border with Canada at all.
Right.
And so it's, it's that, basically.
Yeah. But I just want to point out that's part of what is going on here, really a sense that, this country is somehow, being invaded or something, and we could do whatever we want. Again, there's so many different strands here, but just to keep us onto this next, but this is kind of an ever-expanding conversation, actually, right? But I want to go back to the state and local thing, and this is a question essentially for all of you. But I'm going to start with Carlos here. Is that you've seen the state role and the local role, of government, state government, local government, but also of state and local police, whether it's the sheriff or LAPD or whatever it is, change over time. So, and this could be for all of you, but what is the role of LAPD? What is the role of Sheriff's Department now? How does it differ from what it might have been in the first Trump administration or under Obama or whatever time sequence you want to choose? And here again, I want to sort of flag the presence of National Guard and Marine troops as part of the thing that is going on. But Carlos, you brought it up, so I just want to ask you to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think comparing, especially maybe looking at first at the Sheriff's Department, right? Like LA County Sheriff's Department, the largest in the country, and also during the Joe Baca, era, the #1 local government turning people over to ICE, right? Like more than Maricopa County, more than Sheriff Yorapayo and stuff, right? So I think we've come a long way, right? Like when we have been able to push sheriff after sheriff and ultimately, in 2020, I believe, winning the policy on not honoring detainers unless there's a judicial warrant, right? And so I think that has essentially created like a almost complete stop, right, in regards to people being turned over to ICE. And I think, with LAPD, they have the Special Order 40, which has been around since the 1970s. But ultimately, there was still like that collaboration, that information sharing, essentially moving folks from the local jail or the, local holding cell to LA County as well, right? And so I think we have been able to push, and, during the 2017, 2018, years when we were, during the first Trump administration, we were pushing on the city council to be able to enact the sanctuary ordinance, and all we really were able to get was former Mayor Eric Garcetti saying that we're a city of sanctuary, right? And provide like an executive directive to try to like create some like sensitive locations guidelines and some guidelines for LAPD. So I think fast forward, we have a much more progressive city council, and we have a mayor that has been much more responsive to the demands from the community, and for that we were able to win this a strong sanctuary ordinance here in the city of LA, which is the shout out to the Sanctuary LA coalition that has been working city after city, going to Burbank, the city of San Fernando, Huntington Park, and actually we're right now battling it with the city of Linwood to be able to enact these policies that go beyond police, right? Like it's also about like not contracting with private contractors that share information with ICE, right? Like which is a critical piece as well. So, but I think just going back and then wrapping up in the comment about local law enforcement, right? Like we now have a LAPD chief, right, Jim McDonnell, who was one of the biggest opponents of the state sanctuary law, right? Like during the 2017 push at the state level, he was one of the people that pushed against it, that essentially weakened it in some ways. And now we have him as the LAPD chief, right? And so we're dealing now with LAPD that even though there is this sanctuary ordinance in place, there's other like internal policies that have in place, they're still responding to the mutual aid calls that ICE requests, right? And so, in the very first
what can you explain? So sorry to interrupt, but what is the mutual aid call? How does that happen?
So, I think during the very first raid that happened, at the garment factory on Friday, June 6th, one of the things that was shocking besides having ICE raiding a workplace was LAPD was there doing crowd control, right? And so
while the raid was going on.
So mutual aid is essentially this principal policy practice where local law enforcement can be called on to support or to provide backup for any agency, state, federal, or otherwise, or local, when they're like responding or when they're doing an operation, right? And so, and that is one of the big things that we have here, we're fighting against here in LA, right? Like the fact that, Chief Jim McDonnell said, like, this is part of our work and we are gonna be responding to mutual aid calls, even though that directly means that they're collaborating and supporting deportation machine that is separating families.
Yeah, I mean, to explore some other parts of this, I mean, Jacob, you've been reporting on multiple situations, so you've seen both the operational piece, but also how people in the streets react to the presence of different police. And Mayra, also, after hearing from Jacob, I want to get from you a sense of LA city government's role in the Vasquez-Perdomo case, because, of course, that was complicated too. I don't want to ask you anything you can't share, but Jacob?
In the middle of COVID, which was a very interesting time to do this, Sheriff Villanueva invited me into Men's Central Jail to see where ICE used to be, in the fishbowl. ICE literally had, as many of you probably know, but it was an incredible learning experience for me and to see it myself, an office where people who were being released would come through the system and detainers would be honored, and it was, I think it was part of the reason that Barack Obama got that title, and Donald Trump wasn't able to attain those numbers during COVID and during his first term. So it was maybe not surprising, But it certainly occurred to me that the sheriff's department that wasn't engaging inside the jail and immigration enforcement was on the front lines and perhaps the most aggressive of all the local law enforcement agencies on King's Day, on June, I guess it was 14th, in that video that you saw. The video didn't continue, but had it continued, what you would have seen was, and if you would have rolled it back too, I would have said this is a largely peaceful protest. I haven't seen anybody doing anything violent, but isn't it odd that all of these sheriff's department deputies are on these horseback and now are starting to advance as all of these people are peacefully
Those
protesting.
are sheriffs.
Those are all sheriffs. And as those horses advanced, they started to trample people. People started to run. They used their less lethal weapons on all of us, including us. Used tear gas, pepper balls. DHS then rolls up and drops the smoke canisters out the window of the vehicle. And essentially they have been put in a position, whether they like it or not, you'd have to ask them, some may not, of being in the middle of federal law enforcement and the community. And the tactics that they are using are very familiar to anybody who's been on the streets at any protest over decades and decades here in Los Angeles, whether it's the Los Angeles Police Department or the Sheriff's Department or other local law enforcement agencies. And, you know, I also talked to the Marines and I also talked to the National Guard troops. They too, actually, many of them feel like they're in between the ICE agents inside the building in downtown LA, or they did at the time, and people from their very community that are maybe literally members of their own family who are there protesting these policies. It was, and I think remains, although perhaps less so, a very, very odd dynamic, especially in those beginning moments that while they weren't engaged in local immigration enforcement, they were doing sort of what they've always done in the eyes of people who come out into the streets, which is using force, put down these protests, and in this case, in order to protect this mass deportation effort that was basically getting started in those very early days.
Well, I mean, this brings up the complexities, of course, of local government, right? I mean, because, Carlos, you talked about there being progressive city council members, but then we have LAPD chief, but then, you know, Mayra, I want to ask you to talk about sort of how you see from a litigation, from your office, how you're seeing, I mean, where is the city government engaging in a way that is sort of the way Jacob described in terms of, you know, on the street enforcement, or is there more influence in terms of the pushback at whatever level?
Sure, and within Vasquez-Perdomo, we have had the city of LA and the county of LA, as well as several other cities throughout and counties throughout Southern California, join in through what's called intervention. It's an ability for it's a way in which they can participate in the case by also demonstrating the harms to the cities, the counties, and their residents. And through this mechanism, cities and counties can play a pretty significant role in the litigation by showing the additional harms that are happening on the ground to their community members. It also allows them to show the way in which these enforcement operations are harming the cities and the counties themselves, including through any corrosion of trust when it comes to their own law enforcement officers, because all of a sudden we have individuals who are afraid to contact local law enforcement because you may not know if that law enforcement is going to assist you, and we've seen that law enforcement has not been assisting, as Carlos was saying, during the enforcement operations. And so these, at least through the litigation, the cities and counties can help explain how harmful these operations have been to the residents and to the cities and counties themselves. It's also helpful for ensuring that the harms are presented across the county because of the broad geographical regions that are covered by various cities and counties participating in the case. We have evidence that's showing how enforcement operations are happening in San Bernardino, how they're happening in Ventura, and throughout the region. And all of this is critical for ensuring that any kind of relief that we get through the case is the relief that's going to be applying throughout the district. It's even more so important now when through other cases, it's being able to obtain relief that's that wide in scope, that covers everyone within the district is can be actually obtained.
You know, I mean, one of the things that occurs to me too is, you know, Carlos, you mentioned state government in the Trust Act and other pushback, you know, going back a number of years. But I mean, what's the role of state government in this? Have you seen it? Have they been absent? What do you wish for in that space? State government.
I mean, it's so disheartening, right, to be in this position with the state government whereas in 2017, as soon as Trump got elected, there was joint statements from the Senate, the state Senate pro tem and the Speaker of the Assembly, right? We were able to push the Values Act, right, the state sanctuary law, which, it's not all encompassing, but it did expand protections, far beyond where we were at before. And now we have a state legislature that is much more moderate or much more risk adverse. Mm-hmm. We have a governor who has been vetoing previous proposed legislation that have come to his desk, and obviously he's thinking of higher office and therefore being calculated in regards to what he supports and doesn't support, even to the extent in regards to pardons as well for folks who have had a history with the criminal legal system as well. It's a night and day.
You're seeing
issue,
a difference in the pardons.
Right? Yeah, even at that level as well. And so there's a lot of unfinished business when it comes to state protections, right? Many folks who go through the state prison system there's no protections for them, right? And are being, after serving their time and paying their debt to society, are being turned over to ICE and put in deportation proceedings. So we would like, right? And there's a state ICE out of California coalition that continues to lead and push on these matters, but unfortunately, at the state level, we have not been able to move, right? Mm-hmm. And that is what changed, right? When we were in 2017 and had a lukewarm city council and mayor, and right. At the state level, we were able to move some of this and essentially put protections mm-hmm. that cut across all the counties, right? Ending 27G agreements, et cetera, right? And now we're in a situation where the state is not willing to take a bold stand, a bold position to expand protections for and full disentanglement with police.
Can I just echo that to say what Carlos was saying is that at the height of I guess it was the Saturday or the Sunday after the raids had started, I met with Newsom live on MSNBC in the Emergency Operations Center for the county. And while, of course, there were the political theatrics and he challenged Trump to come arrest him and Tom Homan and all the rest of it, and the moral outrage that I think he righteously showed, he made a point in that interview to say, we cooperate with ICE to honor detainers in the state of California. Mm-hmm. He didn't say it in a defensive posture. He said it almost in an affirming way to say, look, we want to cooperate with the federal government, and so, to me, of everything that we talked about in that 15 minutes, that stood out the most to me, that without reservation, immediately, it was something that he was proud of, even in the midst of that moment that we were having. Genuinely proud, not just trying to, set up bargaining for something else. No, I think he really firmly stands behind it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let me go back to another theme that's kind of run through this conversation. And we talked about telling stories, we talked about reporting, we talked about narrative, and we've also talked about organizing. So I don't know if what I'm about to ask fits into the organizing, under the organizing umbrella, or the telling stories umbrella. Maybe those are really the same thing. These are very difficult times for telling these stories, right? I'm curious. Why the media isn't covering this more than it is. I mean, Jacob, you started to address that, but also we talked about retaliation against speaking out and the measures that could be protective measures, but I didn't get a sense of exactly how protective they are. I think I'm just really raising a very difficult issue I think a lot of people are dealing with, is the stories are more urgent than ever, but they're harder to tell than ever. One thing that occurs to me, and it sounded similar to what you're saying about getting people to come forward to be, plaintiffs or part of lawsuits or to give declarations. The stories that we're able to tell on television now are people who have been almost always either deported or caught up, or it's already happened to them. Mm-hmm. in 2017, I went to South El Monte to a church as the Archdiocese was doing Know Your Rights trainings, and they invited us in, and they wanted to show us. And they wanted to show the country what it was like to prepare people for what to do if ICE comes knocking on your door. And the church doesn't even want to do that anymore. Undocumented sources, people that I've worked with over the years, whose stories I've followed, don't want to be on television anymore. They just don't want to be out front. And so instead you get the stories of Nori Santai Ramos, who went to Miguel Contreras Learning Complex and went with her mother, Stella, to a routine immigration check-in, and both of them were deported, and you may have seen the story, but I mean, the stories are just awful. Her mother passed away when they got back to Guatemala. She's now there alone. Those are the stories that are emerging. It's sort of the awful byproduct in the aftermath because of necessity, because they need help so desperately. Rather than saying, here's what's at risk, here's what's on the line, I'm willing to stand up and put myself in harm's way in the face of everything that's happening.
Mayra, Carlos, more about organizing, and you guys both talked about this before, but I think it's such an important thing that I think I want to get you to say more if you have more to say about it.
I'm happy to start and would welcome your thoughts too, but at least within the context of organizing, I really want to applaud the LA Rapids Response Network, several of our plaintiff organizations who are part of that network and leading the efforts, because and just the mass mobilization that happened in LA County and throughout Southern California in response to the raids, because as soon as there were immigration agents conducting enforcement operations, seizing individuals and doing so in such heavy show of force, the Rapids Response Network and many nonprofit partners and organizations, plaintiffs in our case and others throughout Southern California, activated to help identify people who were being impacted, talk to either the person themselves who had witnessed the raid or talk to family members, and provide not only assistance in terms of know your rights and helping them connect to a potential legal partner who could find a lawyer to represent them, but they were also doing other know your rights trainings, trying to see if there were other forms of holistic support that they could provide to the families at a time where breadwinners, family members were being snatched and taken away from them. And so it was a very impressive and just beautiful turnout by the community in response to what was happening. The other part of that is that it also highlighted some of the just flawed parts of the systems that we have in place, because even though through the organizing we were able to connect with usually family members who had, or witnesses of the raids, it was really difficult to speak with the individuals who had been detained themselves because of all these access issues for people who were placed in holding facilities at B18 or throughout Southern California and deprived of access to counsel, not being allowed to talk to their family members, not given medications that they needed. And there was organizing that was available to support the families and eventually the individuals, but it became so difficult to actually connect with the individuals who were detained or later transferred to Adelanto because of all of these barriers that are being placed on access to them and that are intended to be punitive and make it really difficult for them to remain in detention.
Yeah, I mean, we, and shout out to my colleagues who are in the room as well, have been working really hard. Have been working really hard with, in regards to like, how do we support the families and support the workers who have been detained. I think, since the first car wash raid happened on that weekend, on Sunday, June 8th, and since then, there's been over 100 car washes that have been raided, many of them multiple times, over 350 workers that have gotten detained. And, that's 350 plus stories to be told from them and their families. But, I would say many of them haven't come to light, right? And so part of it is because of that fear of, if they're choosing to fight their case, they may be more cautious about like sharing their story publicly to not impact their own self, defense case, right? Like for others, for many others, right, like they're getting deported the same day or the day after they got detained and coerced to sign their voluntary departure. And it's obviously also for us supporting and prepping and being there for the families, right? Like many of our colleagues have been there when the interviews are happening to support the families that are, doing these interviews as well. But it's definitely something that is very, folks are being very cautious about, like, how they share, what they share, even for family members who might have protection as well. So even on social media, right? Like, I mean, we come across all of these stories, right? And so we're not publicizing, elevating those stories just freely, right? Like we're being cautious about like what we share and how we share it as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just going to say, Caitlin Dickerson has a really good piece, who won the Pulitzer Prize for her reporting on family separation, about all of the deportations that you haven't heard about. And I think there have been, and we have participated in this, sort of bold-faced names in some of these stories, like the Barranco family, Narciso Barranco, who was taken in Santa Ana when he was working outside the IHOP cutting bushes. And because his 3 boys are U.S. Marines, they felt safe coming out and telling their story. But for every Narciso Barranco, there are literally, I don't know, thousands and thousands of other stories that we're not hearing about.
Yeah, and those are the ones that we need to most hear about, right? The most urgent stories are the ones we don't hear.
Just a quick note on that. Right now, there's over 1,700 and I think 91, almost 1,800 people currently detained at Adelanto. And just to think about the number of stories that we are not aware of, that we have not spoken with, it is so important for us to be able to connect with people that are impacted, because in order for us to actually represent the large scale in which these operations are happening, the way in which they are violating people's rights, because the stop was not lawful, the arrest was not lawful, because they had no information about that person, and because the way that they stopped him initially was never was a seizure. We need to be able to talk to the people who are detained, especially individuals who have been experiencing multiple raids, people who have been stopped multiple times. All of that is necessary for us from just a legal standpoint to be able to show the how people are being harmed and how they will continue to be harmed. And so I fully encourage everyone here and those working with us to help us connect with those individuals and help us tell their stories.
Yeah, and just briefly, I think given that we're talking about the storytelling, right? Like the person that comes to my mind right now is one of our longtime members, Juan Hernandez, right? Like he was a worker leader connected with CLEAN back in the early 2010s, was part of our worker-owned cooperative, and he was also working at a car wash, at the Olympic Car Wash, when it got raided on, I think, September 3rd, and he was taken and taken to Adelanto, and we were able to uplift his story. First, like a reporter, Salvador Duran from Univision, responded on the day off and was able to interview the son, and without sharing names, was able to cover the story. But I did go visit Juan in Adelanto and asked for his permission, and we were able to elevate his story. And he was planning to retire and go back to El Salvador at the end of this year, and unfortunately, he was, this was not the way he wanted to go, obviously, and but we were able to uplift his story, the story of his wife as well, and recognize all the work that he did also for the organization, for car wash workers and the car wash industry, and just like his story, right? Many other workers who we haven't been able to uplift their stories are facing the same challenges.
So I want to ask you about something that's...
Can I just say real quick about that?
Yeah.
What both of you just said reminds me that when Narciso Barranco came out of Adelanto, he said to me the thing that he thinks about most are the other men that he met and spent time with inside. The stories, those were the stories that he wanted to tell me about what he experienced inside there. And it also made me think that during family separation, I was invited to come inside with a camera inside Adelanto to interview separated families. They wanted us to see the separated families, to share the stories, because they wanted the depraved policy to be out there to deter other people from coming to the country. Now they're afraid. They're not inviting us inside Adelanto anymore. They don't want me inside there to meet the families and the stories so that I'm able to say, this is bullshit. This isn't the worst of the worst. This is workers from a car wash. Those are people from our neighborhoods.
Right.
You know, and so part of the problem is access, I think, as well, because in 2018 they opened the doors and I went in with a video camera. I haven't seen that happen. I don't know since then. It's all of those things.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it too is that we're talking about going to Adelanto, right? We're not talking about someone who was detained someplace in a very far away state, right? And so, I mean, it's Adelanto is in that sense an unusual situation. But I want to ask you about some other part of it, and another aspect of organizing that's been a strand in this conversation. One way you could think about what is going on now is that, you know, there's this narrative that of, you know, the borders in downtown LA, this is invasion, there's emergency, and then you have a lot of, you have a broadening of the threat, I guess, as you could say, right? It's not just about immigration, immigrant rights anymore, but about a lot of things having to do with democracy. You would think that that would broaden the organizing, broaden a coalition, or you might think that it would narrow it because people would be scared to be part of it, right? So, Carlos, you mentioned, you know, employers, right? Early on, you know, in response to my very first question, what are we seeing with people who would be concerned about this from more an employer point of view, or for that matter, the university, or other people who are affected? Or at least see themselves and their interests implicated in what is going on. What is the organizing there? Is that fertile ground, or is that a place where people are running away? I mean, or both?
Yeah, so I think there's been some, well, we as a CLEAN Carwash Worker Center have been doing outreach, right? Like our organization does outreach to car washes to inform them about their like labor, wage, you know, health and safety laws, right? And educating the workers and also the employer on making sure that they're following the laws, right? Like in regards to the job, right, and the business. And I think for many years we were kind of like the antagonists, right? Like with the employers. I think now it's been a shift, right? Like many employers do welcome us, allow for, we've done like Know Your Rights training together with our other organizations, like on site with the workers. Like in some instances, they've even like closed like an hour early to allow for the workers to be able to have Know Your Rights trainings. We are able to like call and like have their numbers for management or owners to be able to let them know like whenever ICE is in the area. At the same time, some other owners don't care, right? Like some other owners will continue to operate and will work on hiring more people and see, you know, unfortunately and upsettingly, workers as disposable, right? And so I think we're thinking about like how do we also hold those employers accountable, because they're putting their workers at risk, right? Mm-hmm. When we call and say like ICE is in the area, we encourage you to close, please be in the lookout, and they don't close, and they, you know, there's been instances where they have been impacted after our team has called them. Like how do we hold those employers accountable that are only interested in the capital and not the human aspect of the workers that they hire, right? So I think it's a mix of things. I think generally speaking, like we have had those open doors, like some doors opening up, you know, in recent months, and at the same time, right? Like I mean, there is like a whole car wash industry that is, you know, that has not been responsive at all to these raids, right? And so it's another battle that we're trying to fight as well.
You know, go ahead.
In addition to the workplaces, there's also been mobilization within the education and healthcare context with immediately after some of the raids began happening and individuals were stopped or arrested near schools, there was a push for ensuring that schools within LA were aware of like existing model policies, including model policies that were issued by the previously by the state of California. And in that sense, there was an increased response where you would hear stories of students and other staff at the schools pushing back and ensuring that, trying to limit any enforcement operations at the school and pushing back against any immigration agents that arrived, including stories that were successful where immigration agents arrived and left because the staff there enforced the rights of the school and prevented them from entering those spaces. More recently, there's also been some activism within the healthcare space, given the large number of individuals who have been taken to hospitals after suffering from abuses by immigration agents, and those through that mobilization, it is promising that perhaps some model policies will come to pass, and that there will be additional protections available for anyone who is taken to a hospital while in the custody of immigration enforcement.
I have one other thing I want to raise here, but then I want to switch to some questions we received from the audience. But Jacob, you talked about Governor Pritzker, and you've reported from Chicago and other places, a number of other places, And then here in LA, there's also a specific role or a big role that LA has played in immigrants' rights over the years. And so I want to kind of invite you to address partly how Chicago is different. Many people are watching this, listening to this online, who are not in LA, but I think there are also lessons to be learned in a different dimension of this topic, which is LA's tradition and its role in a number of phases. It goes back, many, many, many years. And so, I'm just curious about both dimensions of the geography of this topic.
Well, for me, growing up here and as a college student coming back and marching down Wilshire Boulevard with, I think, 1 million people in 2005 or 6, in the Grand March of the immigration reform protests, to me, what we've been seeing on the streets in the wake of this and in family separation, it felt similar. But maybe that's only because I'm from here. Mm-hmm. My wife is from Chicago, and it was very odd for me to be there where almost the same exact playbook by the operators was being carried out on the streets. But I had never seen anything like 10,000 people spontaneously marching down Michigan Avenue on a Wednesday night while the Cubs were playing in a playoff game, pushing back
Did they know what the outcome was going to be? No.
No, yeah, exactly, probably. Pushing back against the federal government. I think in a way, and Mayor Bass said this at the time, more about what the federal government was trying to do in LA and usurp the power of the local leaders. So it was almost like a petri dish, or it was a test case. I think it's become also equally an example for other cities to follow in the way that LA has stood up and created a resistance. And I think that people have looked to LA from around the country and said, they did it there. Greg Bovino skedaddled and went to Chicago. Now he's on his way out and he's going to Charlotte. I don't think that that's a coincidence, and I think that all started in LA, and LA sort of has given a model for other cities about how to handle these agents when they come to town.
Carlos, Mayra, you've been, you're in LA, and you've been part of this.
I mean, I think while there's been a lot of work being done with the city council and the mayor, right? Like, more is needed, right? Like, I think we need more bold positions and more bold action from the city council and the mayor, in particular the mayor, who has oversight over the LAPD and the chief of police. So I think there was tremendous response and actions, right, especially in the first few weeks of the raids, but we need more of that, right? And I think folks are definitely, there's the organizing that's happening with the rapid response and self-defense networks that is important, and many folks are also, getting tired of, it's taxing, it's draining, and so thinking about like how do we continue to building on that and recruiting more folks into that space. But we need to continue to push back, right? Like not only on the organizing at the local level on the rapid response efforts, but like pushing back, in a political way as well. And the ICE rates are not going anywhere, unfortunately, right? Like this influx of money, hundreds of billions of dollars are coming into ICE and DHS, and so we can expect that this is going to continue on for the foreseeable future, right? So I wish we were able to mobilize the amount of people that we did back in the 2006, anti-censor burner marches, right? Like that was so powerful. It was the first time I went out to a march. But I think there's some paralysis, right? Like with our communities and like the organizing efforts as well. Some just folks being tired maybe as well. So I think we need to continue on, pushing back and not giving up this fight, right? Because ultimately it is, besides this fight against like stopping the deportations and ending family separation and protecting workers, it's also a fight to protect the democracy and and the society that we have and that we should have here in this country.
Right.
And just from a legal standpoint, I think the number of lawsuits that have sprung up throughout the country in response to the enforcement operations there are also creating the conditions to make it just really difficult for them to continue exercising this kind of the rates that they've been trying to adopt and implement throughout the country. Vasquez Perdomo, while it's the case that's here in Southern California, it was modeled off of the case filed earlier in the Eastern District of California challenging the raids that happened in Kern County, and that's UFW versus Nome. And in the same way that they've kind of used the initial raids as blueprints and proofs of concepts for subsequent raids, we've also been using litigation throughout the country and building off and just becoming more creative in how we are responding to make it more difficult for them to be allowed to continue with these unlawful stops and arrests. And so I am optimistic that collectively we will get successful outcomes, but it takes a ton of work, a ton of organizing, pushing back through litigation, pushing back through narrative, through the community, through protest, ensuring that we're telling the stories, documenting what's happening, and being able to tell the court why these raids cannot continue to happen. And I hope that through those multiple efforts, we will be able to stop and put an end to their raids.
One thing that I think you hinted at is that if you think about Chicago, if you think about Los Angeles or California, I mean, we're talking about a particular type of state in the United States, right? And so we have states with a lot of state laws that make it very difficult for inclusive or sanctuary cities to operate in the state. So that's the question, right? There's so many times when I'm on a program or a panel where we talk about what's happening in California, and then I'll get a message, understandably, from some place that is politically very different, and they say, well, we can't do that here, which is why we're raising this question. Because we have a question from one of the audience questions we got really is about about that particular problem. I think you've sort of anticipated it, but it's always a disclaimer, I suppose, or about what it means to be in California and talk about this, because this is lessons from the LA raids, right? And so how broadly are the lessons? I don't know if you want to react to that, but
so speaking for more conservative parts of California, or just thinking about more conservative parts of California, the initial raids that were in Kern County is a place that is generally far more conservative, and even after those raids occurred, there was a significant pushback by the community, by local partners, and eventually by the agricultural sector, with members of Congress actually sending letters to the Trump administration denouncing these raids, maybe not always for reasons we agree with, but in the end, because they also recognized that these were having significant impacts on their workers, on their families, and people were not showing up to work. They were not able to produce the crops that they were trying to meet on a weekly basis. And there ultimately was even a response from people that we would not normally anticipate would respond, trying to ask that the enforcement operations end. So I think even in places that are more conservative, there are ways to still partner and identify how to address the raids and how to approach them in a way that maybe might resonate with other individuals.
Same goes for, I was up in Oxnard, I think, in the day 4 or 5 after the LA raids happened. And I think that was around the time where Brooke Rollins, I think our reporting was that the agriculture secretary was getting some major blowback from people in the community, and that she went to Trump, and Trump almost immediately changed course and said, we're going to suspend operations in agricultural sites, which of course after Stephen Miller whispered
Yeah,
whatever he did in
that
his
was
ear, he
about a day
flip-flopped
and a
in 2
half.
seconds. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it showed that noise, protest, pushback was making its way to the White House almost immediately, and while it didn't last, it happened, and I do think that there's a lesson that happened in the almost immediate aftermath of the raids in LA.
Yeah, I mean, it did happen, and it's something that can be replicated in other places. Let me ask another question from the audience here, is that I haven't shared any of these questions with you in advance, so this is, but one new form of resistance is neighborhood patrols, self-defense networks, and Carlos touched on this. Sometimes they seem to border on illegal behavior. Obstruction of federal enforcement, but they seem to have proven very effective in preventing arrests. So do you and the collective, anyone wants to take this, do you think journalists or litigators or other organizers should alter their tactics in what we've learned from that particular form of resistance?
So we, our organization, and I know like Endilon and other organizations have been leading trainings for volunteers in regards to like how to engage in patrolling, how to engage in monitoring, adopting a car wash, adopting at Home Depot or a day labor corner as well. And obviously many other organizations, whether it's like, Unión del Barrio or the Community Self-Defense Coalition, and others are like doing like constant trainings as well. And I believe this is all within the legal, parameters of like civil rights and civil protections, right? And so that is what we have been telling folks, that we have been training folks. And so we encourage it, we welcome it, we appreciate it very much, right? Like I think just a few days ago when there was raids happening here on the west side of LA, or there was like a raid happening on the west side of LA, and the West LA Rapid Response Network was able to, on the ground inform the car wash sites that there was ICE presence, right? And that was so effective and so helpful. And at the same time, like the documentation, right, of folks that are being taken, and the documentation on how masked agents are behaving is crucially important for the legal part, for the storytelling, but also for the organizing aspect, right? Like the agitation, the connecting, the urgency that is happening, and why we need more people to respond. So I think it is ultimately all we have right now, right? Like when the Supreme Court is going a certain way, when the laws are going a certain way, like it's just the community, self-defense groups that are like really what is at the forefront and protecting, doing the best to protect our communities, right? Like even if we're still falling short, it is definitely what we should be doing. And I think it falls within the civil rights and constitutional protections that we have.
Yeah, well, one of the things that makes me think about in light of this question, too, is that we're not talking about a particular playbook that's not changing and then pushing back is unchanging, right? There's a constant evolution of what the tactics are and what's proving to be successful or not successful pushback, or laying the foundation for stuff that's going to matter in terms of pushing back further down the road. We have a bunch of other questions, but I think I just want to, some of them we actually anticipated, I think, in the sense of it raises these questions of tactics. Another question about businesses and other stakeholders. We could talk more about any of these, but for the record, these are questions I think that the audience very rightly asked, but I think we've talked about, the situation with local government and some comparison with other jurisdictions. So
can I say about the rapid response networks?
Sure.
Having been out with Unión del Barrio and in Chicago with some of the rapid response folks and just watching the work that they do, I think that there's an objective argument to be made by people in my line of work that they're as important as any first responder on any front line. They are literally doing life-saving work, given the fact that on the 210 freeway, we saw a man running from a Home Depot raid that was killed in a car accident. Right. We saw the man fall off the roof in the raid in Oxnard. We've seen in Chicago people shot and killed in these enforcement operations. And so the idea that there's something wrong with members of the community notifying their fellow community members that this type of enforcement is coming their way, as a reporter, certainly, going back to the facts on the ground, I don't see it. What I see is people warning that danger is coming their way, and heads up, pay attention.
Let me, because we're almost out of time here, but I want to give you each a couple minutes to address a question we got from current law student, and it's one that I think in a way we've all been thinking about. I'll just read you the question. How do you keep yourself hopeful and committed to this work when it feels like you're staring down a mountain of bad? I'm sure you can address that adequately in 90 seconds each.
This is my favorite part of my job.
Yeah, what do you say to someone who's asking that question?
I talk about this all the time. When we made the film about family separation, when Errol Morris made the film based on my book, we didn't know who was going to be the president. And at first I thought it was going to be a look back and Joe Biden was going to win, and it was a reminder of the policy of 2018, 2019, and going into 2020. And instead it became a roadmap for what they were going to do in this administration, but it also became a roadmap in resistance. It was a reminder of the things that I said earlier, that those hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, the reporters, the citizen journalists, the activists, the lawyers, are the ones that, the civil servants inside of the government that fought back against the policy, are the ones that stopped it from happening. And I see those reminders around me all the time. And when I say it's my favorite part of my job, getting to be with people like you all, getting to be here and have these conversations, getting to meet people who are in the middle of this, gives me hope every day. I wouldn't be out here if I didn't feel hopeful.
Right.
Not that I know what the outcome of these policies are going to be or whether or not they're going to stop, but that there were not, I mean, look at the election results 2 Tuesdays ago.
Yeah.
I think that was directly connected to what we're seeing on the streets that are happening right now. Look at the amount of people on the streets in the second No King's Day protest. Millions of people more than came out the first time around. I think there's hope all around us. And it's the thing that keeps me going in my line of work.
You want to go first?
Sure. I'm usually an overly optimistic person, and I think these times it's been hard to be that overly optimistic. With that said, where I'm finding hope and where I think what keeps me grounded and gives me really the support that I need to continue moving forward with this work is speaking to the individuals, speaking to all the families who are being impacted, not just, we talk about it as an immigration issue, and yes, it's affecting people with status, but it's also affecting U.S. citizens. It's affecting anyone who appears to be of a certain demographic profile that is really broad that they're targeting. And in speaking with these individuals and getting their stories and connecting with them and learning about what motivates them, and just getting the facts of how long they've been in this country, what other community ties they have. Like, I think in the end, the facts speak for themselves, and I think it's the facts and the mountain of evidence that we can develop and put together and create for the record that is going to ultimately help us win this fight through the cases. I am also constantly feeling really supported, not just by our clients and plaintiff organizations, but also by all the people who are working in this fight, from the people who are helping us from the journalist side to everyone on the advocacy and organizing, and the large collective that has come together both in Vasquez Perdomo and in other cases where people are daily pushing back against multiple issues that are coming up throughout the cases, but in a way that's thoughtful, optimistic, creative, and with this resilience and interest in ensuring that we will tell the right story, knowing that we are on the right side, and that in the end, I do think we will prevail.
Carlos.
Yeah, I know when I'm at the office at our worker center, and my colleagues ask me like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm okay." Yeah, it's always like a down, response, and I think they call me in or call me out on it, and I appreciate that. I think so. I think the team, we're like a small and mighty team at the worker center. That we're doing everything we can to support the workers and the families and the children, right, of the workers, whether they're detained or not, right? Because many folks have been impacted by the rates, even if they haven't been picked up, right? Like the work has slowed down. Folks have had to, go into sheltering, et cetera, right? So I think the team gives me hope, right? Like the work that we do there, and obviously the members, when we have had either our virtual meetings or in-person meetings and our trainings, et cetera, connecting with them grounds me and gives me hope. I think the other part of it is also like, we've had these fights before, like, or generations before us have had these fights before, right? Like, I mean, California in 1994, the voters overwhelmingly passed Prop 187, right? Like one of the most draconian anti-immigrant laws, in the country, and which was a blueprint for many other states' policies as well. And so, and we have been able to come out of that, right? Like that created like a whole new generation of like political and activists and organizers, right? And so, and like that many other places. I recently connected with an organizer from Chile who expressed about how, gave his like support and, optimism to us, and saying like how in Chile, they had this, years of the night of neoliberalism that he called it, right? Like under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, and how they were able to come out of that, right? And so I think, when we talk about Jim Crow and slavery as well, right? And so we have, like, this country has been in many dark times, and people have been able to fight, rise up and push back and change the course of history, right? And I think looking ahead, we will be able to get there, right? Like we will be able to come out of this, and it might not be decided by an election, right? But it's gonna take a long time, and I think ultimately, my daughter and my wife, right, like, and my family, but especially my daughter and the new generation, right, like, and that conscientization, that conscious making that we're doing with our children, I think gives me hope as well, and gives me going.
I'm glad to end on these notes and wisdom. So what we want to do is close this out with video that I think is forward-looking in some significant ways, and that's so. But we're going to show this in just a couple minutes. But I want to please join me in thanking the panelists here.
Than 100 days in federal custody, a beloved ice cream vendor is free and giving back to the Culver City community that fought for his release. Back in June, Lozano, who was undocumented at the time, was taken by immigration agents on Culver Boulevard. His ice cream cart left abandoned on the sidewalk. He spent 4 months in ICE detention as supporters rallied around his case, raising money and hiring attorneys to get him out.
When he was taken away, how it shook this community.
Lozano has been in Los Angeles for nearly 20 years, no criminal record, and the breadwinner for his family.
Muy bien. Yeah, muy bien, todo bien. The whole story is the community of Culver City came together, and this is the result of that. So all of us are very, very proud of that.
First and foremost, I think it shows that that we're serious about building a community. For the people who are out, the community members who are out here just looking for day labor, just looking for work, they're our neighbors, So we want to let them know that regardless of what's happening in Washington, D.C., these folks are our family here. So we want to let them know that people care about them, are looking out for them, are concerned with their well-being. It's important to witness, to bear witness to what's happening. I happened to be here when that day that ICE came here, and it was a really scary moment. It's good to document things because there are people out there, even within local governments, who will say that these things are not happening. And they definitely are freaking out. This is really happening right here in this country. That's one of the reasons we're out here. And it's better than feeling helpless.
Thank you very much.